Hello from Oldenburg Vineyards. I'm Adrian Vanderspuy. I'm here today to tell you the story of Una V Chardonnay. It's a new Rondekop release that will be coming out as of November. It's the first time we've made this wine, and I'm standing in the vineyard where it comes from at the foot of Rondekop. Una was my grandmother. She lived on the other side of this mountain at a place called Old Nectar, which is a beautiful garden that she built up over 70 years of her life. I started my life in this valley, and when I was about 3, I left South Africa, and ever since then I've been returning. But when I was a child, I'd return every Christmas for Christmas with my grandmother, who was at Oldenburg, or my Una on the other side of the mountain. And over time, it became clear to me that, Una was a big influence in my life. She was responsible for us returning every year. She encouraged the idea of getting family together for Christmases. And I think as I got to know her and I was starting the Oldenburg project back in 2003, we started to talk about a lot of things to do with gardens and plants and nature. And one of them was actually the indigenous plant life of this part of the world, which was fascinating, and it's a great story, all the fynbos, and we've talked about it many times on these videos. But it's something that behind me here we've planted and we use as part of our farming, and across the farm I think we're at about 6 hectares now of fynbos corridors and areas set aside to have nature that surrounds the vineyards, and we actually use that to help keep our vineyards healthy. On the river, we have 1 kilometre of river, and when I started the project, we cleared thousands and thousands of alien trees, as we call them. They're invasive species, gum trees and Port Jackson and wattle, mostly from Australia, but they take over and they consume vast quantities of water. And the idea was to rid the farm of these invasive trees and put nature back in its place. And that really came from her inspiration. I think as we went through time, and as I got to know viticulture and looked at what we were trying to do, which was really just using this beautiful site of Rondekop to make these just incredibly well-crafted wines, the idea that in our vineyards we should treat them as a garden, and every plant as a unique part of that garden. It was actually a sort of philosophy that I cut and paste from her thinking at Old Nectar, where she established this wonderful garden. And it's a philosophy that when Christo started, he really drove that further. He was he spends an enormous amount of time with our staff in the vineyards, and really high level of hands-on attention to detail, training, motivation, showing them the big picture, showing them that this little intervention and that little intervention actually ends up with this sort of byproduct, which is where quality comes from. It's little bit by little bit, it's polish by polish. When Nic started in 2018, he very quickly identified this spot as an ideal Chardonnay spot. We had a block of Chardonnay on the lower part of this sort of rocky ground, and we actually, in our sort of replanting of the farm program that followed Nic's arrival, we put another block here. So OV15 and OV16, really creative names, but they're all on this extremely rocky, well, you wouldn't call it soil, you'd call it rocky rock. But the Chardonnays have thrived. So, we planted this block in 2020, and its first harvest was last year in 2023, and that harvest went into the winemaking process. And in January this year, Nic said to me, "I've got something special," and from there we bottled a very small amount of our Rondekop Una V Chardonnay. So it really is. It's you know, I think this is it is quite a personal story, but it's a story that, you know, there's a lot of inspiration that I took from Una Vanderspuy, and I think it's really sort of manifested itself in the sort of essence of what we're doing here. It's, you know, we're about small quantities of beautifully crafted wines, and I think this wine is very special. We'll have a taste with Nic in a second, but you know, for now it's I mean, you know, how can this view not be truly inspirational? And I think working with nature and you know, working with these plants in the vineyards and treating this whole of Rondekop as a garden is really a massive breakthrough in terms of how we deliver on the potential of what's on offer here. I think we should go and find Nic and try this Una V maiden vintage. I'm here with Nic, winemaker at Oldenburg, and Nic, you've put this together, but just a couple of questions. Chardonnay in Oldenburg has become really, really interesting. I mean, the last few vintages have been absolutely fantastic. What is it, to your mind, that really makes Chardonnay work here?
Yeah, I think, you know, Adrian, just looking behind us at these beautiful mountains, the elevation, this is where, you know, what makes the difference. So Vanderspuy, of course, being the only ward in Stellenbosch with a continental climate, basically meaning moderate days but very, very cool nights, just helps with the acidity and flavor formation in Chardonnay, and that works really, really well on our terroir. And then, of course, the granite soils, the coolness, and yeah, we've just planted our 9th vineyard, so it's definitely something of the future.
Yeah, no, it's an amazing. It's been an amazing project putting all these vineyards in place. I mean, you made the call, you know, probably nearly 6 years ago now to you know, the Chardonnay in the block next to the tasting room was you know, really spectacular, and you thought that, you know, we should extend the block up, which we did, and we've produced this. But in January this year, I remember you coming to me and saying, you've got something special. What was it about this wine that you thought was so special?
You know, Adrian, myself and Jürgen have been tasting all the Chardonnays, and we've got quite a few parcels in barrel. But when we were doing blind tasting to evaluate the wines, this specific wine always just stood out. It had power, it had this lovely bit of reduction, this minerality to it, and a fruit spectrum which is very different from the other Chardonnays. It had more of this type of fennel, licoricey, and citrus character, which was very different to our, you know, to the rest of the Chardonnays. So every time we tasted it, we identified it as block 15. And funny enough, I mean, our best Chardonnay on Oldenburg was planted here before we removed it, and it's great to see that the terroir is showing and shining again. No,
clearly. Well, I think this is yeah, this is a very special wine, and, you know, as a maiden vintage, it's just super special to go out with a maiden vintage and a wine that has my grandmother's name on it, which is you know, it's obviously very personal and special to me, but I think with great cause. I think she really is part of the sort of fabric of what we're doing here at Oldenburg, that sort of, you know, love of nature, love of plants. Treating the vineyards as a garden allows us to, you know, viticulturally, you know, deliver grapes that are, you know, really allow you to do your magic. But you've done your magic on this, and cheers.
Thank you. To many more vintages to come.
Absolutely.